meeting. First off, we got any apologies? I don't think we can. No, it's all good. Declarations of interest. No. Got any public forum petitions or deputations?
Thank you very much.
No. Confirmation minutes. Someone to move that they were accurate.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman, with one amendment on page 3 or 7 on the bottom. Where it talks about Lloyd McCall, chairman of Waimahaka. It was actually the Pomahaka.
Where's it? Page.
Page 7.
Yeah. Second.
Oh, Pomahaka. Yeah. Have we got someone second that? For that we slide.
Second.
Councillor.
Oh, and another one there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm not recorded as being made a statement or an apology, and I am in the committee, so I can't actually remember, but I think I was at the coastal restoration conference in 3 days and was an apology for that.
Okay,
Great.
we're all happy to add that. Right, Councillor Roy second with those couple of adjustments. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Right, move on to notification of extraordinary emergency business. I don't think there is any. Well, any questions? No. Anybody got any reports regards to this committee? Simple, wouldn't it? Right, we'll into item 9, General Manager Operation Report. Please. Who's your question?
This,
Fiona? Fiona? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've got two items actually in the agenda today for discussion. So I think they'll be familiar to all of you, but Stephen Dixon, the Sustainability Officer, is going to talk about item 2, the capacity building project in the Bates as our catchment coordinator. She'll talk to us, talk us through item 1 around the sustainable farming project. We'll just do a quick update and then happy to take questions.
Good to go. Okay, morning everyone. I'm here to update you this morning on the Sustainable Farming Fund for the farmer-driven catchment management in Southland. So this project began in 2017. It's been running for 3 years and it concludes in June this year.
Sorry.
Just a bit of an echo going on there.
Slight.
Yeah, hearing a double, but that's all right. Yeah.
So the aims of this project are to develop our catchment groups across Southland, help them identify their local issues and implement good solutions, including good management practices, all to do with improving water quality across catchments in Southland. So we've developed a number of groups around Southland. Some really good key achievements in the project have been having 21 groups developed so far, 70% covering Southland, and we've got more groups emerging to date. These groups are cross-sector, so sheep, beef, dairy, arable, and horticulture, which is great, and they're working with whole communities, so having a whole community approach, including urban and rural communities. Environment Southland has contributed to these groups. So each year we contribute $20,000 in cash from the Land and Water Services budget and $90,000 in kind from Land and Water Services also. But also the council has been involved through a number of divisions, so communication, science, compliance, consents, organisational support, and biosecurity. offering support to these groups as they undertake these projects. I have also been appointed during this time, so started in 2018, to work with the catchment industry team. So that involves Beacon Land, Land Trust, Dairy NZ, and lately MPI. So working together to help groups with projects, sharing resources with catchment groups, working together to reduce duplication when we do events and education, so we can enhance the outputs together. So the groups have been working as individuals and as a collective through the FMUs. So looking at greater awareness and implementation of good management practices across the area. Looking at individual and community wellbeing also was a really big thing. So getting groups together for education, but also working on health as well. So we have really pushed the message that we're all in this together to improve water quality improvement across South. And so the next step for our groups with the fund finishing in June is Thriving Southland. So this is being developed at the moment. So these groups will transition into Thriving Southland when this project launches.
And just probably to add, you're a key contact for us now with Thriving Southland community to help with that transition and to understand the nature of the project as it unfolds, the Thriving Southland project unfolds.
One question, Lloyd.
Thanks, Jeremy. Mr. Chairman, are these groups actually happy with that transition? Now, the meeting I went to, there seemed to be a lack of direction, a lack of, it was really honest, they had achieved establishment, but weren't too sure what their role was going forward with the bigger, wider picture of limit setting, recognition of catchment, how they could work within the team of activities that are playing. So I just wonder whether they're actually going in the right place, because I think Thriving South doesn't actually know itself what it's going to do.
Is it yours, David? You see, okay, that might be better. I just saw yours coming up.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Lloyd.
We sorted it.
Just-
Okay, we found the
It's like Twilight Zone we're working out.
found the culprit.
Trying to work out. I think it was coming up. David's one was coming up, so switched on to. Do you want to repeat that? Quickly repeat that, sorry.
I think you got the gist of it.
Yeah.
You've given us the impression basically that it's a very seamless transition. I don't know whether it is, and I think we actually need to do more work in this space because they are going to be so important going forward. But I don't think they actually understand the full extent of the regional forum, what it's trying to do, how they'll play in that space, how they'll play going forward. And I think they're a little bit lost. And there was a discussion when I was there, I went and spoke to them in Winton, and I don't think they were quite clear about some of the things that was coming to them, and they needed a bit more reassurance that there was a bigger, wider plan in here. So that's my comment.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, and just in the conversations I've had with some of the groups and working with Megan, you just we want to hear Megan. Certainly the unfolding of Thriving Southland. So the first thing I say, the kind of emergence of Thriving Southland and what it's about and how it's going to operate and what it's going to do and how it's going to deliver that is very much, I would say, emergent, still unfolding for them actually. So the contract has not been signed. It was only signed in the last month or so. They've now obviously they're recruiting for staff to support the project. I know they had a meeting, a workshop last week with catchment group leaders to help with some of the questions that you're asking about, Lloyd, but you're right. And certainly when you attended the catchment forum, there was no contract signed. There was, and things are definitely emerging. So I think that's probably where I would leave that. And I think they're now in a position that they've got funding to actually to kind of move that forward. in terms of Regional Council Environment Southland, Megan is meeting quite frequently with their project leads to try and help make things as soon as possible. And the catchment groups themselves will need to actually be involved in those discussions. Like any sort of major project working in with a big fund like this, there's lots of talking to happen to actually decide what's going to be achieved, what's important, what the parameters are. And there will be some things that the fund people want, and there will be some things that the community want. And I suppose one thing I would say is we've always been super clear about the fact that this has been a farmer-led process. And so it will be interesting to see as the project moves into this new space, how that works, Yeah.
Can I make one comment about Edie's head on? I'm not sure if I want, or I need to be very clear about a third party in my relationship with the catchment groups. So do I, as ES, directly correspond with the catchment groups, and they're part of one of the things that we do and interact with, or do I go through a third party organisation? I think we need to be very clear about how we actually interact and where they sit, because they want to actually have direct, I would presume, contact. They want to understand detail and have resources on there. So the framework to that, how that structure sits with Evermaths and team is actually very important. And I think it's important for Environment South and we get that right from day one.
Did you want to add?
Do you want to add something? Sorry, Megan, just Rob. You.
I think it's also useful, building on what Fiona's talking about, is recognising that government's made a significant investment in Thriving South to actually develop an extension service working with the catchment groups to improve water quality. We've been pushing very hard to make sure that work is aligned with our, and that's, I guess I would say, it was still a work in progress. But that's, and I'll be positive there. But that's really important that we get that alignment. And EPI need to understand around the importance of this as part of a governance package around improving water quality. They put out some regs, EPS, NES, fresh water we heard about yesterday. This is the non-regulatory part of that. And so really important to see as part of a bigger picture. And we were pushing very hard for that to happen. We've got scarce resources in the region, so if it all works well, this is really good for us. Actually, it's got to be aligned. And so when we get into looking at catchment plans and improving water quality in catchments, that work's going to need to be integral to that and part of that. And so that's our challenge. I'm not sure whether, and we've got to get that big picture thinking into looking. And I know Fiona and her team and Jonathan are doing it. So yeah, I think it's useful to think about this as part of something bigger. That makes sense.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, look, just a couple of things. Use the words we've developed. We've got to be really careful around that language. Just to start on that side. The catchment groups I've been involved in setting up on two and in the process of setting up another one at this moment. They're very tenuous at the best of times, catchment groups. They look for motivation and it's really hard. Got to be very careful, and with Thriving Southland, I think, and I take up what Lloyd was saying before, got to be very careful that we don't overburden these groups. You give them an opportunity to come in at a later stage. It's not all in or nothing, the autonomy of the groups is very important, what they feel as though they're in control of what's going on. I just want to say, one of the biggest things on the ground is to get people to come along and talk about, and so it's really appreciated Environment South staff after hours making that time to come out, way out to the countryside, whatever, to talk to them, probably get home at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Can't underestimate that. It's really important. And good management practices, great. I've really got concerns about over-pressurising groups that it's all going to be about them. They're going to drive this transformation. I believe they can support it. There's no doubt about that. But as the key driver, I have doubts. I don't think that's just my personal view.
Nickel.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Actually, Rob just stole half my speech actually.
Shooting top.
It's been fantastic to get some extra funding coming in, but I guess my concern that's coming on the table a little bit is I wish actually government and MPI would trust us a bit more. Let's work as a partnership. Great to have the money, and it's fantastic to have a number of groups popping up around the countryside, because we know it's action on the ground, it's personal responsibility that's going to make a real difference. But we've had another hiccup with initial funding running out, Thriving South, and supposedly a significant amount of money, but we seem to have to go, a lot of energy has to go through the hoops. And I mean, as a regional sector, we are the natural partner for government, for MPI, for MEFE. And I guess my plea is fantastic, but let's have a linked up conversation. Let's work in partnership, and we'll make some real progress.
The only thing the only engagement I had with a catchment group, I was quite, it was the way they approached the Thriving South and representative was there. It's certainly going to be really important how to communicate. It was actually quite, right, you're going to have to do this, and all of a sudden they were going, even I was sitting there going, where the heck did this come from? So it was actually quite a, it's quite a confrontational from my position, saying that it's going to be, I don't want the, from my point of view, seeing catchment group, oh, well, you're in here, you get thrown into here now. But they're actually groups that are actually running them themselves. They shouldn't be actually controlled to, they'll be funding, but they've got to be driven by themselves. So certainly don't need to be, I should say, controlled as such. And I thought that some of this transitioning, it sounds like they're being moved from one department to the next. So that was my only feeling one day at one catchment group meeting. But anyway, we'll move on. That's a good discussion. So I've got someone to recommend to note that report. So McCann, second it. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. That's the building. Sam, are you going to give us right now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this report is to give a summary of the workshops with the chairs of the river liaison committees and to brief the council on the updated terms of reference, which is currently not council policy. And we have also changed our river liaison committees, as you'll notice, to a new name of catchment liaison committees to line up with the fact that they all fall into a full catchment. The capacity building project, a project developed to respond to a range of emerging issues in Southland where river management, water quality and soil conservation are closely linked. This is within a social setting where numerous catchment groups are forming, community expectations are changing, and central government requirements for environmental limits to be set and implemented and creating an impact. The capacity building project team has engaged with the chairs of the river liaison committees since the beginning of the project. From this engagement, a series of workshops evolved over the 2019-2020 financial year. The discussions at these workshops were constructive and highlighted a range of issues and also proved a more effective way of conducting river and flood management businesses. From these workshops, it was evident that the existing 1979 terms of reference is outdated and restricts the scope of the committees the scope of the work the committees have and the connection to the council. They have also highlighted a change in name to suit the future rating structure change to catchment liaison committees. And that is part B of the capacity building project, which is setting up a more fair and competitive rating. So our next steps in the capacity building project are to engage with the committees, the catchment groups, iwi and federated farmers, and the river concept plan steering group to inform them of changes, the necessity for the changes, and how the changes are to be adopted. A webinar on the project has been proposed for early June to enable the community and especially the committees to access information on the project. However, with COVID-19 restrictions being lifted, we're able to go back and do community presentations. So they will most likely be happening late June, early July. And this will enable the community and especially the committees to fully understand the project and access all of the information they require. The terms of reference will then be finalised with the chairs and a report will be provided to council for its discussion. There will be continued engagement with stakeholders through a coordinated plan to enable integrated catchment management across. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions?
Mr. Chair, just probably, I mean, the terms of reference look really good. Just probably a concern I would have is just the power and influence of those committees and a catchment, because you've got sub-catchments that have actually got issues, and I'm probably a concern as to just how much influence those 10 people would have without, I mean, the concern I suppose is if that committee didn't have an understanding or representation to understand that particular issue, just their, I suppose, their influence and their credibility may be called into question and get lost. I mean, I'm probably talking from experience. So really, I think it's something that we need to be careful of.
That is a noted potential issue, and with that we have done the ability to extend our committees if 10 isn't enough for especially if there is a project for some catchment within the catchment, we can extend that to 15 if it needs to. We've got that flexibility, but we've got a number cap on there so that we can continually have the same information and committee structure to report back to the community.
Thank you. It's just something I think that we need to be aware of, because there is going to be issues within catchments, particular areas.
That might be something for this group, or indeed when we go to council, to think about, because effectively there's a representation question in those committees. It is important to remember they come from a point of a rating structure that was designed to give that group of ratepayers a say in how that money is spent. So it's important to keep that, and that's a very important element for those members of those committees. They've made that really clear, because in a sense it's how do we engage with council on spending money that we've been rated for purposes. But no, that's an interesting point. Okay.
And just carry on from that, Mr. Chairman. It's really around when we start getting into the limit setting.
Yeah.
That's where the issues are going to start to rise. So it's just something that I think we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Nicole and then Lord.
But Fiona, did you want to add something to that conversation first or not?
No, I think John has.
Okay. Yeah, just and I was probably putting Sam wrong with that. I think in front of me the last conversation when I suggested the word may, but it would actually, people do get a wee bit picky on some of these directive words, and when we talk about each committee must, should might be a better word, and even on the 10, normally not more, just softens things slightly, and chairs will attend or an alternate. I think you've done a lot of work. We're almost there, but all these groups are different, and they're volunteers, and if we can be a little bit diplomatic but have flexibility, because as David is saying, some of these groups may have more people that are needed depending on the size of the catchment, and as we've already said, that these groups will remain, but that once we move into a FMU type thing, they will be represented there. It doesn't mean they're all going to be compressed into an area, but great work. It's been a bit of a journey, but well done, Sam and Fiona. We're about there, I think. So well done.
Just John.
Thanks through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. We take that on board. Language is one of those tricky things that the word should isn't the same as the word must, and so we need to make sure when drafting our terms of reference that we don't leave space for interpretation where we don't want interpretation as an organisation. So we'll have to just check on that. But I do take your point about that. Because if we perhaps say place the word we should with must, we could see ourselves in a couple of years' time having a debate about what was the intent of the terms of reference. One of the issues with the current terms of reference is they're very brief and very general, and that has led us into some interesting discussions with our committees. So we take that on board, and we do. I understand very clearly what you mean by they're volunteers, they're people to give up their time, and we don't want to be too directive or authoritarian around that, but we just need to be a bit careful. So there might be some areas where we might just have to look at what word gives the same meaning. That was all.
Thanks.
Just a couple of things for clarity to me. I presume that an individual doesn't have to go through this liaison committee or through other processes. They can come straight to council if they want to. So I think we need to make sure that the process is a clear pathways for people. So I just want to make sure that that's captured in there. The other thing is we've seen these groups in the past being asked not to directly talk to us as being ES, but have been adding support to or being asked for advice. And we saw that effectively through the Environment Court. They've been asked to give their support or their commentary on a proposal. So we need to make sure that, do we recognise that as recognised by other parties? It's not clear in here. 5 picks it up to a point, but it talks directly to council. But if, you know, the YL, for instance, they might use the YL catchment group as a leverage because they've got some representative group. So are they a lobbyist or can they be used in that way? Is that the framework of what you're discussing or not? I don't think it is. I don't think we want to go down that track, but they need to know sort of what they can do and what they can't. Then it goes back to my first question, can individuals come and speak to us directly? They don't have to go through this other organisation. So as long as that's clear in the term, it's a little bit messy in there. I don't think so I just raised that because we've seen that in the past.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, those are things that are absolute. So the first question is, yes, absolutely an individual, and we need to make sure that people are clear both the committees, but also it's a very good point you raise, and it has been canvassed within the discussions with the chairs and amongst ourselves staff around the role of other frameworks, the ability to still potentially be involved in council processes in a different way. So that's something that we will make sure we cover off and have some clarity on, because it specifically has been raised by the chairs as a discussion point, and we have examples, as pointed out, where these things have evolved, have been issues. So yeah, certainly we'll make sure when you see this coming back to you that things like this are specific.
Okay. Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify from myself and maybe some others that this is actually it's a scaffold document. It's not a list of directives per se. It's a scaffold document for these committees to work, to fall back on if they need to. There's still flexibility and scope within their groups, but if for example they had a personality issue or whatever, then they've got the governance guidance and the membership guidance and all that stuff in this document to fall back on if they need it. But generally speaking, they can, it's just the base, it's the scaffold for them to work to from.
To set up our catchments to be able to liaise back to the council to share the full catchments perspective to the council on our residents.
So I think, from some of the feedback I've had, some of them feel like it's a directive and they have to do. But actually it is just it's a more holistic document. Yes. Good, thank you.
If I can add to that, obviously I've had numerous phone calls about this from the chairs and things, and that's the thing. It's actually a document saying they can probably still work maybe the way they are used to, but I like the word should as a wee bit. We need to correct them a wee bit. I do feel that for some people sometimes need direction. But it's to engage with the other people too and the other groups and things like that. So we're saying you need to talk. So, but it's certainly a document that they can, if anything goes wrong, hey, here are the rules. And we always fall back, get back to the base, and then we can carry on. So, and but we don't want to. One thing with Nicole's comment is we don't want to shut down enthusiasm too. If more people want to be involved and things like that, we certainly encourage these things. So there's a happy balance there to try and get. Now, Johnny.
It is important that we facilitate and enable in that scaffold sense, but this document also needs to and must put the constraints around the operation of those groups that the council sees fit. So there are some things that are very important in there that we as a council, because remember, these are not subcommittees, they are committees of council. So, you know, they're advisory committees of council. So we have to define the operating parameters for them. Now, we can define them any way we like, but nonetheless, there's some constraints. And one of the important areas where we have to be is when they're expending monies on behalf of council, we have to make sure that's done with the right probity and all of those sort of things. I'm not saying that it's not done that way now, but in thinking about the scaffold, they're the important bits that create that framework. So that's why I say sometimes there might be a must and sometimes there might be a should.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. You did good work with that, guys, and seeing you hit some pretty tough rooms to work in there. Well, actually, there's some parallels here with the previous discussion around the transition of the catchment groups to thriving Southland and how that's done, and it's not easy sometimes, but I really do feel that we've got a new direction, and we need to match that with a whole new level of trust. And so probably what could have been lacking is seeing it's really given in the conceptual ideas that we have probably at your level to what the future might look like for that buy-in, and now we need to bring them into the room, I think, and that trust is a two-way thing. We've got to demand from those groups too that you're in with us and we're moving forward. So good work.
Nicole, just quickly.
No, just finishing off, but you know, the point of this is actually to give these groups the ability to do more than they've done in the past. Doesn't devalue the work they've done in the past, but to take a whole of catchment focus to link in with the catchment groups we've been talking about. You know, this. And you're right. You've got to have the right structure around it. But you know, you've got a document that was probably written on the back of an envelope back in the 1970s. It was time for an upgrade, and change is always difficult for some people. But I think we're getting there. These committees will have a wider role if they so wish, and that's great.
Yeah. And you say thanks again. It's been interesting discussions and things, so it's really good to get. So thanks for the whole thing. Rob,
just one last thing, again, just building on a number of the comments. You know, it's also quite a powerful signal that there's change coming along in terms of the need to improve water quality on a catchment basis. And we'll be looking for these groups to provide us with, to provide you, the council, with advice. So it is an advisory group, but it's really crucial around actually signalling that we're going to have that catchment working together in a whole raft of areas to actually make those improvements. So, you know, it's quite a significant step.
that's good. Can I have someone to Lyndall, David, second that, all in favour, say aye. Against, carried.
Mr. Chairman, this next article I'm actually mentioned as one of the participants for the rock work, so can I be excused from this item? I need to take the phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries.
Paddy.
Patty,
Paddy's second day back in the office.
has it?
Paddy.
Was he on a holiday or something?
No, he was
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
Get that off. Welcome, Patty. Welcome back.
That's great. Yeah.
It's good. I've been working at home for a long time.
Did your wife say that? Sorry.
So I'm just here to give you an update on where we're at over the last few months. The flood repair works from October, November, flood in the wire. There was 3 major projects there that we had to get done this year. Actually used to carry over balance from last year to cover those costs, and those 3 projects have been completed. There are further projects, but that's in discussion with the rating district, and they will need to be, or they were going to be spread over the next 3 years. It's not a lot of big lump sum.
And that process is underway.
That's
Discussion.
discussion. So the February 2020 floods, obviously everybody knows what happened there. We've gone through and addressed all the major problems that we had. We had a number of stop banks blown up, smaller ones, but the major ones through Gore, Matara and Wyndham. And on the Matara, they stood up just, but they did quite well. But it was some of the smaller ones that we had up in Cattle Flat and Waikato Blue, and they have been repaired now. And a lot of it is insurance that's helping us. Looking at the Oriti, we had some stop up there, up 5 Rivers, a couple of those went, and we're quite happy with our risk assessment at this point in time where we are at. We've still got a lot of work to do, but we've got nothing that we feel that is high risk at this point in time. So that's our major. So we move on to shovel ready projects that the government has introduced that we applied for, trying to get some funding. They were trying to get the economy boosted, get back up and running, and also employment. We applied for a number of projects based around, a lot of them were based around climate change and future levels of stop banks, and we've worked out, we have worked out over the period for a while that some of the areas we need to increase by 0.5 metre through the Matara system, and also in the Invercargill city area. So Invercargill City Council through Alvin Clare, the CEO of we combined an application for the Invercargill city area, which is they put in the Steed Street Stop Bank, Cobb Road. We put in for the new pump station on Steed Street, and Invercargill want to raise the stop bank on Steed Street, which they maintain. We do not. It's not one of ours. By sheet piling all the way through by 0.5 metre, which then reflects on our stop banks up the Waihopai and the Kingsville. So if they put that up, we have to put up ours as well. And we were going to have to anyway because of the climate change conditions. So we lumped it all together, combined our application, and I think combined came to about 27 million with their stuff and our stuff. We had about 7 or 8 million of our own, a new pump station, which is going to be about 3 million for that, and then the rest made up with the top up stop banks through the Waihopai, the city. We also put in for the Matara, raising the banks through Gore, Matara itself, and Wyndham by the same sort of margins to prepare for us for the 2050 expectations of what the levels are going to be, or particular floods that we're going to be. Went in and we have got past the first hurdle with the government, and it's now gone through to the ministers for consideration. They had 1,400 and something applications, so we went it down to 800, and now they've gone to the ministers to consider their applications. And basis of that is start straight away. So we can on most of it, we can start straight away. We've got the pump station designed, all ready to go, source pumps from overseas, and
local contractors doing the work, so it's all basically ready to go, because we prepared just a couple of years ago.
So, just through you, Chair, we are in a good position to take advantage of this opportunity. We're reliant on partly the good work of the sector. The regional sector has pulled together a combined bid across, and Rob might want to just touch on that, a combined bid across all the regional councils, and through that sector structure, again ahead of the play, had prepared a document about the need for investment in this type of infrastructure at a national level, and I can't recall the title of the document off the top of my head, but it was led by the River Engineers SIG and Basil Chamberlain, and that thinking ahead has given us an ability to provide central government in this situation with a large number of projects that are needed to be done by across the country, and so that's been a great step for us. Don't know the final outcome of funding yet. I mean, it's a bit of a crystal ball up there, and I'm sure government's doing its best, and it's a pretty busy time for central government. So, but it does show the advantage of thinking ahead, getting prepared, and providing that documentation. So we'll just see how it goes, and we'd have to come back, no doubt, and we don't make a decision, so it'd have to come to council about how that is all funded and delivered and those sorts of things, if we get the right messages back from central government. Rob, I think.
Yeah, through to you, just following on from Jonathan's comments, and the work was done. It's recognising that actually back in the 70s and 80s, when a lot of the last work was done, the last investments were done from central government, they were putting in 50% at least of the cost of this. That investment stopped. Actually, the problem hasn't gone away. And we've now got climate change coming over the top. And so, this work has been done, as John said. So we're all prepared. It's been socialised. The ministers known about it, and we've talked about it and pushed for it. So it's an opportunity, I guess, to take that work forward. And being reinforced in the past, the government was a significant investor, and they are still a significant beneficiary from this work in terms of things like national infrastructure, state highways, bridges, which at the moment they don't pay the rates or do any sort of fund anything towards this. So we think it's a very appropriate investment for them to make, and also fits the shovel ready.
Peter?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Have you, Eddie, given, you have to give quite a lot of thought to the way you'll structure these works, because obviously the basis around is getting people back to work around these shovel-ready projects, and you concentrate a lot of work on multiple parties or stretch things out? How do you think that?
One of the key things that in the application was how many were going to be employed from this, and I think we had about 75 new jobs. That was a real key thing that the government wanted to do. And structure, yes, we've got the contractors here to do this, and a lot of it's just topping up stockings throughout the system. Pump station is a different kettle of fish. And what Invercargill City Council does about Steed Street stopping, they're sourcing their side of it, source materials, that we can go on here. Of course, but we don't that was critical.
Yeah, 75 spots.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this a replacement for the pump station on Steed Street? So to speak?
It's past its use by date.
Yeah.
Yes. It's built back in the 50s.
I can see people working there. I'm just wondering if is the airport contributing to that? Because it's sort of largely for the benefit of the airport, and that's the farmer, Mr. Connor there, it's a dairy farm. So are they sort of...
That's ICC going too. There's a tool rate at the airport to contribute to us, and also in the city council contributes as well. But it is a very small rate.
The other question was about the spraying. There's quite a cost in the aerial spraying up the rivers. Is there sort of follow up on that, just to see that money is effectively spent, and that it it is doing what it's supposed to do, which is to keep the riverbed clear of unwanted vegetation.
Yeah, there is follow-up all the time, and usually it's on a 2-year cycle, because it is so expensive. $7,000-8,000 a year for the rate base, for the rating district. So we do follow up, we monitor it all the time, and we're also looking at other alternatives of what we can do, especially on the fairways out on the margins, rather than spraying that, looking at other.
You've got one more there.
One more is the south and flood control and drainage management bylaw. We put that in, but I think most of the councils know about that. That's gone through. And it's just specified or highlighted prior to the previous bylaw, some of the issues that we're having, especially after flood and failures and things like that.
Okay. Just in regards to that, there were stories about people stacking stuff back there. Have you ever seen any evidence of that?
I haven't been on the other.
Oh, no. Sorry. Any of your crews? I had heard, and I thought.
Through you, we'll follow up on that.
You might be able to.
I'm sorry, Peter. Got other things going on at the moment. Just in relation to that though, we've got bays stored in an old siders pit down the side of the river that was there before the bylaw came up. So there is a process, we need to be clear about this, there is a process of while the bylaw is in place, I'm not going to go and pick it all up, but it'll be gone by the end of the winter. There is a transitional period here we actually need to go through. And then this is actually, in my view anyway, more important from this spring going forward around behaviours. Now we've got this in place. So I think we can let people know, and when we see it, we say, look, next year we need, but this is the behaviour we expect. But there is a transition between when you put something in place to the new behaviour. So
we're doing a very good communication on that, radio and in the papers and things like that.
Yeah. So I just want to point out as well that to do that, we actually, some of us voted against ourselves. So this does have a, there's a point that was raised with me the other day. To do what we've done, we've actually said, yes, there is a cost to us as councillors, but for the greater good, we said this is what we want to do, because when you look at the Wyndham process, 2 kilometre wide river, we actually need to do this for the region. So there is an individual cost, and I've got land, for an example, over the flood bank that's never had water on it, but this captures that through the bylaw, and I accept that. We will change our behaviour, but we need a little bit of transition time to move from what we have done to the new.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case, and that's why we're publicising it quite heavily at the moment. But we haven't enforced anything as well. But we sort of pointed out also that it's not a good investment for landowners to put their bailage out in the floodplains where it'll get washed away. So.
The other thing that came up to me, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is that there is land there that is quite suitable for other activities. So when you're feeding it out in the winter time, putting it there for a week before it's eaten, how does the bylaw cater for that?
If it's there for a week.
So, for instance, there's a little bit of detail. We might, for instance, go out and put bailage out for a week's activity, in other words, break feeding across the paddock. I'm not sure in the bylaw we thought about that. We talked about storage, we talked about being laid out with the summer crops. So people are going to say, well, how do I get on? Because theoretically, I could be seen to be breaking the bylaw, but in reality, I'm actually using a grown feed with a supplementation, hay, baited straw, silage, or whatever, as we go good management practice across a paddock or an area of land.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, so the practical implications of the application of the bylaw would take those on board. There's the process by which they'll work through. The bylaw comes through the Regulatory Strategy and Policy Committee, I think, is that correct? Yeah, so it's probably not the right forum here to address those matters, but we can certainly flick that through to that wider discussion. I think that's the best way to deal with it.
Thank you. Peter.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that, if I could, Mr. Chair. I think we need to extend our communications around stock banks and the sacrosanct of stock banks I'm seeing around the province. Animals and bailage on the side of stock banks. So we need to be really clear around that.
I'm sure you get, look, it's an ongoing, that's the advantage of our catchment officers out there in the field. It's constantly reminding people, and people might do it for a short time, just as a convenience thing. It's just constantly keeping the need to be off the stock banks in people's minds. And that's just going to be an ongoing dialogue with our community, much like a number of those things are. We've just got to keep reminding people, because you get comfortable with stock banks, floods don't come all the time, and you get comfortable with the way things are. But as we've seen in February, all of a sudden, over a couple of days, you've now, and the need and purpose of those bits of infrastructure that you need it there, to meet the performance criteria, is paramount. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, we'll carry on. Have I got something to move the update on the catchment? Eric, second.
Yep.
Lyndall, all in favour, say aye. Yes, no. Carried. Right, Patty, do you just want to give us the contracts progress? Is it Patty? Contracts. I think it's
Yes,
probably well. Yeah. Where all the money's going.
Yeah, this is a standard reference to all the works orders and jobs that have been done over the quarter to March 31st. So there's a lot more since then. That gives the council an indication of where the money is spent.
It's all pretty straightforward. David?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, Paddy. I know there's a huge amount of rock goes in. I know you're looking at surveying that up through the river channels just to look at what's what there, but with the gravel beaches, some of it's creating a situation where we're having to put rock in. Is there a way of actually, I'm not quite sure what the cost of gravel extraction against putting rock in, how that works.
Through Mr. Chair, the gravel extraction can be done in many ways, and quite often it's done by contractors wanting purchasing it, paying the royalty for it. Present point of time, we've done a LiDAR survey between Macharo and Gore. We've also gone away up to give us a real good indication of where gravel has gone after these floods. And then if it, under investigation by mine engineers, we'll be looking at where we have to move it. And of course, we've got to get consent to follow it.
Good. No more questions? All right, is someone happy to move? David, and someone second it? Lyndall? Good. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Carried. Right. We can move into public excluded. Is that correct?
Oh no, before
No?
that we'll
Oh, do you want?
have doc.
You want to put the regular time
Regular
slot?
doc reg update, yes, between.
Yes. Okay, take it away, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it seems like a lifetime ago since we last met in March. And I know I was going to come back to someone on council about something that was a question raised, and I'm sorry I lost my note during the lockdown. So if there's some burning issue that someone remembers, please just come back to me. Good. Look, over Department of Conservation, like Environment Southland, has been basically shut down for basically all level 4 and most level 3. The first piece of priority work that we had come about was checking hoiho chicks, yellow-eyed penguin chicks, the catlins, because they're going through their molt. And 2 or 3 birds were removed because they were very thin. Thank you. Sorry. But overall, that wasn't too bad. Of course, numbers are very low and are consistently low. The only other major thing we've done is with the turned down international visitor levies, especially for the sub-Antarctics. We've parked our Mokuhuka project. They missed out on some funding. They have picked up some more funding, but what we're doing is parking that in the meantime, that project, and redirecting that group into some predator-free work, focusing on predator-free rakiura in the meantime. Yeah. Another thing significant that's come about that we're involved with is the planting out of Douglas fir out at Matara Station. That's an interesting situation, and I believe Environment Southland will be involved with it. I was talking to Randall Mill maybe 10 days ago, and at that stage, Environment Southland hadn't been formally notified of this consent that was done by the Southland District Council. So we are just preparing a response to Southland District Council on the process. It's a tricky situation because really we're caught in between two different government policies. We've dealt with a number of ministerials that have come our way. The whole thing really falls under Section 43 of the Resource Management Act, where the National Environmental Standards, there's a scoring of a wilding tree calculator which can be used, and the scoring of this for this situation was out of 21, it was at 12, which my understanding was 12 or less. You know, you don't have to have a consent as a notified process. We are saying, well, how did you score it that low? We've asked for the workings behind that, and that's in train. It's work in progress, but yeah, it's something that is concern to us because the property borders dockland where there's a lot of tussock land and a number of unique flora and fauna species to be found there. And as you'll know, Douglas fir is the second most invasive conifer species in New Zealand, and not something we really want to see planted out because we're just possibly creating another mid-dome situation, which you guys will be very aware of. Yeah, and that's probably, we're just ramping things up again and getting back out. And of course, like a lot of other organisations, the revenue's down with lack of tourism and visitors and great walks and things like that. But yeah, we're getting there. Any questions?
Lloyd. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul, great to see you back again.
Thank you, Lloyd.
And a number of your walks are open, so that's good. I think there's been a concern. I think Councillor McDonald raised it earlier on. Was the when you first come on council, the plantations as a whole. A farm may be okay, but we could be end up with blocks of farms coming together. And your comments around the right tree in the right place are actually quite valid. I think we all not too sure where all that lands, whether it's us, whether it's SDC, whether it's yourself, or whether it's a combination of. And I think there needs to be some clarity and so probably some blue sky thinking in this process to, you know, who are we, what we're here for, what do we want and where, and can we actually manage our landscape better, working with all the sectors that are there through the primary industry. So I think somehow we actually need to get a better concept on that, and I think there's some urgency behind that as well.
I totally agree. What we've done is to handle the ministerials that have been raised. We're in the crossfire between two ministers, the Honourable Minister of Forestry, Shane Jones, my boss, Honourable Eugene Sage, Minister of Conservation, also Honourable Damien O'Connor, Minister of Agriculture, and you're dead right. On the one part, there is the promotion of plant, and another minister saying right trees in the right place. And so we're in the crossfire here, and we have to be very careful how we proceed with this because we're dealing with central government policy, and being a government department, you know, it's a bit tricky. So the ministerials that have been raised came to me, and I've since been able to get a national policy team involved with these because they need to be dealt with Wellington at that level because it's there's tension between two ministries here, basically. And I totally agree. We need to have some better spectrum and communication across government agencies, regional councils, because we're all this together, and we must not live in the fallout of polluting our catchment for the Matara, especially in this instance, and just the millions of dollars we spend on tidying up of wilding trees. So Lord, I totally agree with what you're saying, and we need to progress this, and it is being progressed. I've got no answers for you at the moment.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say, look, I totally support your thinking here, Phil, and I think the word is landscape values. What do we country to look for? What do we look for in programs to look like? If we sit back and do nothing, we know it's going to happen. So we peek into the future of what could happen with Ontario Valley Station. And I also would like to question Southern District Council. Are they the right agency to be handling these sort of large, very important decisions? Do they have the expertise involved to make these crucial decisions?
One thing that is ongoing is there is a national review of the National Environmental Standards, Section 43 of the RMA. MPI leading that. I understand it was paused. It will slow down somewhat. But that needs urgent attention, and we need to have a better transparent process where affected parties can comment, and otherwise it's a ticking time bomb.
Very good. Questions did you have?
I had
Oh, sorry, Eric, I did have it.
That's quite
I've been
all right.
offline.
A reasonably insignificant person.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, Eric, sorry.
No, look, you just mentioned WIHO earlier, and the media has been quite full of the parlous recruitment process that's going on with chicks and just a lower recruit. What's actually happening there? Can you sort of update us on that?
Of
the WIHO.
Okay. This season, they're continuing to decline. I'm just trying to remember, get some figures. I know in Whenua-Ho, which is predator-free, there used to be umpteen nests, and we do nest counts every year. There would have been in the 30s, and then they've taken a steep dive, and they were down to about a dozen, and it's predator-free. So there's something happening in the marine environment.
Okay.
With the catlins, with the discharge from, say, the Clutha, and a lot of silting up, that also affects the ability of birds to feed. But there's been a number of chicks that have been starving, so there's something desperately going wrong. If one parent disappears, then that's toast for the chicks. So what we've done is a lot of intervention, removing chicks, taking them up to Penguin Palace and the Wildlife Hospital in Dunedin, feeding them up, taking care of them, and then releasing them at a good standard. We're doing a lot of work around, in conjunction with Yellow-eyed Penguin Trust, Forest and Bird, other interested stakeholders and parties, but we don't exactly know why they're in such decline. Little bird penguins are doing fine. The feedback from the Rakiaotiti administering body is that this season for Titi have done phenomenally well. It's been the best season in a long time. And so why are some species
There's some sort of paradox that you've got Fjord crested and blue penguin doing very well.
Absolutely.
And you've got a blemish with the
Oh, yeah.
yellow eye.
Yeah, that's right. And so we don't know. It's an ongoing problem, and we're working on it.
Oh, of course.
Lyndall.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, Lyndall and Lloyd, they're all popping up now, so
Thank you, Mr.
quickly
Chairman.
as we are.
Oh, we're over.
No, just
Very quickly, just wondering about the tracks, Milford route burn, and the huts that were so badly damaged.
Yes.
And how that might be looking. Obviously, there hasn't been much work done
No,
lately.
there hasn't been much
but,
work, and I don't even have a time frame. I can find out and get back to you.
Yeah, I vaguely remember hearing something about one of the huts not being restored. I can't remember the name of it. But we can talk about that offline anyway.
Yeah, I can come back to you.
Thank you.
That'd be good.
Held on.
Yeah.
Same as you, I just want to pick up what Phil said. I think for ES, we need to understand some of the other markers that are sitting around us. We've always had a farming head on us, and we've dealt with things from a river maybe into a estuary perspective, and we've looked at that. But I first come across this out when I was out just out the coast there, the resource out there, and I started to realise that there were other factors that we could be looking at to get an understanding of what's happening in the land catchment. So I'm really suggesting, Mr. Chairman, that we can somehow link up some of those markers, and maybe they're different than what we've seen before, but it would actually give us a better perspective on this mountain to the sea view. And maybe we had been looking in not necessarily the wrong places, but we didn't understand the full marker regime that's sitting around us. So let's make that comment as a comment, not for it doesn't need a response, but I think we actually need to link that better.
I agree. And one thing we would love to see, and we're working towards it, and I think doing very well, is working with Environment Southland, having a lot of synergy, because at the end of the day, the outcomes we want are much the same. And we have different drivers, different pieces of legislation, but we can work more closely together, and that's something we are doing. Just
Thanks, Phil. I think that's all from your question.
Well, the question you previous minutes indicated the question you were going to get back to us on, as you pointed out when you first started, was the same question that was asked by Lyndall, but at that time it was actually asked by Eric.
Thank you.
Now
There we
the
go.
question.
We got an answer. We got an answer anyway. You get back to
It was to do with the track,
Yeah.
the tracks and the huts and the walls.
Tracks and the huts, that's right.
That's great. So
Between the two of
thanks.
you, you've taken and you kept in.
I'm happy to move the verbal report. Mr.
Yep.
Chairman.
And a second for that. Lyndall, all in favour, say aye. Against, carry. Right, we need to move into public exclusion, and
Second.
Eric and Lyndall, we got reason.
Someone gonna disconnect.
Yeah, so remove the public exclude.
Yes.
The matter may be subject to proceedings in the environmental court.
Right, all
We
in favour.
disconnected, anybody might be
We've
webinar.
got to move and see.
Just say, yeah, we're gonna move everybody in, all in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.